We'll give it a moment here. And with that, we are live on YouTube. Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to Around the League from UGAsports.com. This is our SEC-centric show. We do it weekly, and our schedule may be a little disrupted this week, but there are 3 games in the conference, and we will get to those. I am Dane Young. That is Brent Rollins from Pro Football Focus, and the College Football Hall of Famer, former Georgia head coach, Jim Donnan. Guys, we do it every week. We get to our accountability from the previous week. And let's start with the bold predictions because all of ours came in the Georgia and Florida game. Coach, you said that Georgia would have 5 plays that went for 30 or more yards. I thought you were going to be on track for that early.
Could have been.
Yeah, well, I was planning on counting warm-ups.
Well, maybe Brent should have too because he picked Adam Anderson for 25 plus snaps. Let's see what I have here: a sack and 4 quarterback pressures. Didn't quite happen for you, Brent.
No, he didn't get anywhere near that, unfortunately.
Well, I said Georgia tight ends would have 75% of the production that Kyle Pitts had, which Pitts didn't have a lot because of his injury, but Georgia tight ends had 0 production. So that's not good for any of us on that particular game. On our picks, though, I get some bragging here. I was 3-0, and that takes me up to 15-6 on the year. Brent was 2-1, takes you to 14-7, and Coach 1-2, 12-9 on the year. So
who did I miss? Georgia.
You picked Tennessee to beat Arkansas.
Yeah, that was a bad pick.
Well, there's always a chance at redemption, and that can happen at any time. But, you know, the marquee story in the SEC is the most games canceled so far this season in the Southeastern Conference. And, Coach, just with the schedule changing like that, I don't know if you want to come at the perspective of the league as a whole or how a coach would handle this if your team's game got canceled. But I would love your input on just the turbulence that we've seen in the conference schedule this week.
Well, you know, the thing that everybody needs to sit back and reflect on is some of these teams are not having the overabundance of one's too many positive, that's for sure. But what ends up happening with the contact tracing that's involved, the people that are around, the SEC has a rule like similar to the CDC, you know, that you got 14 days of quarantine if you're exposed because of the fact that, you could have a situation where you expose other players and other people. So that's where we're running into all these massive games being called off is that, it's like Missouri had one person positive, but had so many others. And you got to remember that your squad limitations, anything under 53 players, they're saying you can't make it to a game. You got to have at least 53 to try to play. So A&M didn't have it. Missouri didn't have it. And that's just the way it goes. I mean, time after time, LSU for sure didn't have it because they only got about 60 guys on scholarship. And then you take away the contact tracing. And then it's just, maybe you guys can explain it better than me, but I think that's until we get, down to 7 days instead of 14 days, we're going to have the same kind of situation. Hopefully CDC is going to try to go with that.
Hey, Brent, I'm curious your input too, because your day job, has a lot to do with some of this. So I would love Doc's info on this.
Well, like Coach said, it's you have to follow protocol. That's beyond a shadow of a doubt. You can't just sort of well, yeah, we're okay. No, you have to follow the protocols. And those were set in place a while ago. And until those get changed, you have to follow them. Now, in terms of explanation, my only thought in terms of explanation is Halloween. And, that sort of the element of that and stuff going on around that time. And then now you see this here, I think it kind of messed with things a little bit.
Could have. I mean, we hate to see games get canceled, but obviously people's health is number one when it comes to this kind of thing. And we'll just see what happens from the season from here. There's going to be some work for the SEC to try to reschedule some things. You look at a team like Missouri now that's having to make up 2 games. And how is that going to happen? Are there going to be games that aren't played? Or are there going to be games played on the day of the SEC championship game? That's all stuff that Greg Sankey and the SEC office has to determine.
Well, where it's fascinating too is the fact that like Texas A&M, I mean, they're looking down a barrel. I read today where there's 99% chance they're not going to be able to play next week based on the number of guys that are quarantined, and they got a game with Ole Miss. And in Texas A&M's case, everybody's saying, that really doesn't know as much about it as maybe some of the other people. It doesn't matter. They've already lost to Alabama, but look, they got a chance to be 9-1, and who knows what's going to happen in the playoff role. But all of a sudden, you don't get those 2 or 3 extra games and get to 9-1. Look at Ohio State. I mean, Big Ten. I mean, they don't have any makeup games there right now. You got a situation. Ohio State's already missed one. If they miss another one, you're going to see Indiana and Northwestern and all those teams right up there because they're playing games.
It's a fascinating just sort of look and year, and obviously it is what it is in 2020. But when you think you could have a playoff where maybe 2 teams have played 9 or 10, and then another's played 5, 6, and then another's played, 7, 8, where just the discrepancy is there, and where it comes a lot of that to the sort of eyeball test as much as anything. The thing interesting with all of this from me, and Coach, your perspective on this would be great, is how do you keep a team just sort of day-to-day motivated? We experienced it with youth kids this year where you're not, especially when you're not playing for a championship. That's the key. When you're not in a either playoff or conference championship type mode, how do you keep sort of day-to-day motivation to the point where you get quality work done and everybody's just kind of like, forget about it?
Yeah, I think in the case of, in particular, Georgia here, after having such a massive loss and disappointing loss, you just can't wait to get back out there because you know what you're capable of if you eliminate some of these mental errors and get some of these injured players back. But you got to give Florida credit. They took advantage of everything that they needed to and definitely outplayed us and made a lot of good coaching moves. But as far as motivating your team, you just always talk about, hey, we're playing against our standards. We still got a chance to get a big bowl. Who knows what might happen with Florida? They may not. Somebody might knock them off, and who knows? So we got to take care of our business, and the same thing's true throughout the league. Let's just say a team like Vanderbilt. Hey, we haven't won a game, but we're capable. We got to get one. We got to build. You measure success in degrees. Success for some teams, like Alabama, winning all the games. For other teams, winning 7 or 8. For others, it's just trying to get to 500, and for others, hey, win 2 or 3. It's just an interesting, unbelievable situation that I hope never happens again. But just like today, we got the deal where you can't have any more on-campus visits or go out and visit recruits until April, and so we're going to have a whole year where every one of these coaches has never had any direct contact, in-person meetings with any of these prospects. Now, how are you going to recruit like that? You got to be inventive. You got to do things with Zoom. You got to do virtual visits, but you got to keep building your program. And then the other thing that worries me is who's going to keep playing. How many of these kids are going to opt out right now and try to go for the pros, or just opt out and say, hey, we can't play for the championship. I don't want to put my life in jeopardy with this COVID. I'm not going to play anymore. So
I think that's the most interesting question, especially when you look at teams that kind of like Georgia, that where you think, your championship aspirations, you had very high expectations and they're now out there. And the key is it's different when you're playing when you're going to play every week. Now when I got a week off. And like if you're in Texas A&M's world, they're at least lucky that they truly have something to play for moving forward. But if they didn't, and now you got 2-3 weeks off and not playing, it deflates the sort of the mental focus that players have. And it's just going to be fascinating to see how the rest of the season plays out.
We always talk about roster management, and Coach, I'm glad you mentioned what you did, because think about just the quandary that all of these coaches and all of these programs are going to be in, because you don't get to see recruits in person for a full year. You have players on your roster who can get essentially a pause in their scholarship progress, so they get to come back for whatever year they would have been starting this season. And then you've the NCAA kicking around the rule of the 1 free transfer for every player. So how in the world would you know who's actually going to be on your team by the time spring and summer get here? This is just going to be so crazy.
You had the fact the early signing date. You had the fact that some of these juniors are going to go on and go pro. So roster management's going to be huge. I mean, no question. And how are they going to affect the 85 scholarships for everybody out there? You can only have 85 on your team at one point. So coaches are preparing to lose 15, 20 people. But let's say 10 or 12 of them come back and you sign a whole class of 20, 25 players. Are they going to give you a 1-year exemption on the 85? I mean, I hope they do.
I would think they'd almost have to figure these numbers out. We did break down, Coach and I, and Rodney Nabolsi and Jake Roos on Tuesday, Georgia and Florida, and we kind of rehashed that. But Brent, kind of moving into this week, this is kind of a segue since I haven't heard your take on some of Georgia and Florida beyond our Film Don't Lie piece that we write. If you want to chat about that and kind of lead us into Florida's game this week, our marquee game of the week, Florida and Arkansas.
Well, it's interesting that, and my take on this might actually be something that's a little shocking, but I think we hit the nail on the head with the Film Don't Lie piece in terms of talking about, one, the missed opportunities that Georgia had. They had ample opportunities to make like game turning plays that they just missed, either slightly with a throw or a drop pick six or any sort of thing. Now, in terms of the matchup and the totality of the game, I think what you saw was Dan Mullen early identified, hey, this is a matchup that we like, and we're going to figure out all kinds of different ways to exploit said matchup. And that was in essence the story of the game, is they figured out how to get their athletes on your linebackers in coverage continually. I think it was something to the tune of 363 yards that they had, that the tight ends and the running backs had receiving in that game. So independent of that, and there's a lot of things that we could obviously talk about that, but that goes into this week because to me, Arkansas is almost a better matchup for Florida than Georgia is. And someone might think that I'm crazy in saying that. But in terms of what we just saw, and then who Arkansas has on its roster, you have Felipe Franks right now who's playing and throwing as accurately as he has. They have playmakers on the outside. Trey Burks, sort of in terms of the Doc's date of the week, Trey Burks, along with Jalen Waddle and Chris Olave from Ohio State, he's one of three receivers who has a perfect passer rating when he's targeted. He's a playmaker on the outside. So Arkansas now has some pieces. And then secondarily, the defensive part of Arkansas against against Florida's offense. Georgia is a 50% sort of more, or a little bit greater than 50% man with zone over, or with safeties over the top, but a lot of man coverage. Arkansas is the flip of that, where they are primarily a zone cover 3/4 type team and try to keep everything in front of them and make plays. So just the contrasting styles, it might actually end up being a closer game, I think, than what we saw last weekend.
Coach, if I would have told you before the season that Arkansas would be on a greater trajectory than Tennessee halfway through this season, you would have told me I'm crazy. And I would have said I was crazy too.
Yeah, I mean, you never know how people are going to react to a new staff. Sometimes it takes a little while to get it going, sometimes overnight. And particularly the fact you didn't have spring ball or summer ball. Just the way this team has meshed together and taken advantage of opportunities, kind of got a jump start with that big win over Mississippi State with all the picks, and really just a well-coached team. It's going to be interesting to see without their leader this week. Coach Pittman has COVID, so they're going with a guy that has some experience and has had a big win as a head coach in the Swamp. 3 years ago, Coach Odom took a team in there and just got after with Drew Lock. They scored 38 points, I think, on Florida and just ripped them. That was before, I think, wasn't that before Coach Mullen was there? I'm not sure.
So. That was McElwain.
Might have been actually 4 seasons, but he knows what it's like to be a coach, and he'll handle it. But I'm sure he'll still call the defense and all that. But it's just going to be important that emotionally Franks doesn't try to do too much. He's going against all his old buddies. He wants to prove he made the right decision and leaving. And they should have put him back at quarterback when Trask came in for him. All that, and it's going to be emotional, but if he can keep his emotions down, and he's just good enough runner to avoid the rush, and there's no downer on this. I mean, Florida We talked about it last week, giving up 300 yards a game, and all of a sudden they give it 109 to us. And the whole point is they're not going to overthrow these guys. They're not going to drop these passes and, have all these things that Florida had happen to them last week. They're not going to beat 2 out of 13 on third down. So I doubt that they'll win, but they'll sure scare them.
Well, and Brent, you mentioned Felipe Franks and that Arkansas offense, but speaking of Barry Odom, it's the Arkansas defense that has won a couple of games for them this year. He's just done a marvelous job with the Razorbacks defense.
And what's amazing, you think about just the quickness and like Coach said, spring practice, and then all of a sudden you're a completely different team. It's amazing what confidence can do. And then you go back to Franks, and one of the things that you think about, how can, someone who's struggled with accuracy his entire career, how can you help that? Well, you become the number one team in the conference, Arkansas, that is. Arkansas is the number one team in the conference in use of play action. So, all right, so now you're giving your quarterback extra time, hopefully cutting the field sometimes and define read. What do? You use the screen game. They're the number one team in the conference in terms of percentage of screens. Another thing you can do to help your quarterback, RPOs, let them read and sort of define throws for them. Hey, one read, make this throw or give this handoff type deal. And they're the number two team in the conference in terms of RPO percentage. So Kendall Briles and what he's doing offensively to help Felipe Franks is very much, guiding him in the right direction and putting him on a trajectory where he wasn't in anywhere near close to that a season ago. Now, the other part that's interesting when we talk about Arkansas is Kyle Pitts is questionable. If he does not play, that's a big time weapon that now is not on the field for Florida. So interesting. There's so many intriguing things to this game to me.
Yeah, I had a source tell me that Lewis Cine hit, that collision with Kyle Pitts, actually broke Kyle Pitts' nose. That's how violent it was. And we saw it in real time, and it was a little scary. I mean, that's old school. I mean, that's Greg Blue style football. It was targeting, but I don't think it was a malicious intent or anything like that.
No.
It's hard-nosed football. Lewis Cine knows one way to play. Coach, I did want to ask you, though, because Dan Mullen has done such a masterful job with quarterbacks in the SEC we're going more than 10 years now. I wanted to ask you how Kyle Trask is playing at such a high level. Why do you think Mullen continues to give Emory Jones the series that he does? Is it a different look? Is that something that he's just committed to? And so regardless of what the team's doing, Emory's going to have his spot?
Yeah, I think in Emory's case, I mean, he's good enough for sure to be a starter. And, he wasn't the one chosen to come in and replace Franks last year against Kentucky when Franks got hurt. So they made the move with Trask, and he's never relinquished the job, but he wants to let the young man know, I got confidence in I'm going to put you in the games, and, you're going to be my quarterback. But if you can't even get in the games, it's hard to look at the kid and say, well, I got confidence and all that. But hey, he's showing really good belief in the young man. And there's no question he's got a different motor as far as running. And we know how he can throw, and he'll be a good quarterback for him, and he'll have a good supporting cast. They got a lot of good young receivers. But I think the other thing that he has going for him, Chris Johnson is a quarterback coach, played quarterback for him at Utah, has had a really kind of a stratospheric move as far as a quarterback, offensive coordinator type guy. And he's got a really good relationship with these players. I mean, he really is, as a head coach, even if you're calling the plays, you got to have somebody be in between you a little bit, because you got to deal with the rest of the team. And I think having Chris there really helps him.
Florida's offense was just clicking on all cylinders. And like you said, Brent, I think that's because of accuracy. You mentioned it with Felipe Franks and him being more accurate for Arkansas. Kyle Trask, especially that second quarter against Georgia, you couldn't ask for more accuracy. Yep. Now, it was a little worse in the second half, but that second quarter was lights out for that Florida offense.
Yeah, he's now tied with Mac Jones for the leader in big-time throws in the conference, which is at PFF, the highest graded throws. And he's playing now on a level that he's never played, and really kind of taken that leap that you thought he might take from a consistency standpoint. Now, he had his moment late in the game that Mark Webb almost took advantage of, but still yet on a throw by throw basis, he is playing high level football.
Let's move on to our next game, and heavy hearts for the Kentucky Wildcats offensive line coach, John Schlarman. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. 45 years old. He passed away after a battle with cancer. And coach, he was a guy that you saw when he was playing for Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, very good coach, recruiter, a UK man through and through. And, you know, it's just the coaches developed the bond, particularly O-line. You guys know, it's just a different kind of bond with those guys, O and D line, because they don't get a lot of recognition. And, you know, they get these all conference and all that, but they're never in the limelight. And they work extremely hard on their end of the field, hitting the sled and hitting the bags and doing everything they can to get ready. And, you know, it's just been a tragic situation for this man to, you know, endure the pain he has. But I know he really enjoyed that game that they played. You know, that big win over Tennessee, kind of dedicated the game to him. So heavy hearts for all of us. You hate to lose anybody to this dreaded disease, but particularly at his age. And, you know, he had a good career there playing for, I mentioned that Kirby, you know, Kirby was playing at the same time for me that Schlarman was playing up at Kentucky.
Yeah. And, you know, Kentucky's offensive line's been really good under his tutelage too. So that's that one accomplishment. There's a video that Kentucky football put out on their social media today where they were just asking different coaches and different people in the athletic department just how they felt about him, and just to watch the emotion come on their face. I mean, it made an impact, and that's all you can really say. Let's make the awkward transition, Brendan, to on the field, because Kentucky does play Vanderbilt, which typically is a good sign for SEC teams. They get the Vanderbilt bump in their statistics. What are you saying with the Wildcats and the Commodores?
Well, you talk about offensive line and the issues and the things that there in terms of recognition. Well, let's give them some recognition. 4 of the top 14 graded linemen in the SEC are at Kentucky. The 4 guys that they had coming back. They had Darian Kennard is the 6th highest graded offensive lineman in the entire FBS. So in terms of what they thought their strength was coming into the season, it's been a strength for them all year. And it's the strength and the identity of their team, very much so. But now going into this week, it's more so about the next few games for Kentucky than it is this week. This is the get right game. And as you just mentioned with Vanderbilt, in terms of your offensive stats, looks like Terry Wilson's going to probably play at quarterback. And unlike Georgia, who's sitting in a situation there where their sort of championship aspirations were hurt, and you look at, hey, let's play more young guys. I think Kentucky is the opposite of that situation, where we are still continually building an identity, and we're about to play the 2 of the 3 toughest opponents on our schedule after this, because they have Bama and Florida right after this. So if Wilson comes back, gets a very positive mojo offensively, which after what Ole Miss did to Vanderbilt last week, that's highly possible that happens. And I think much like we thought we would have seen Georgia do against Kentucky in terms of putting it in the air a lot more, I think Kentucky will do so against Vanderbilt, because they know they're going to be able to stop them and really, really get ready to test Bama and Florida in the next 2 weeks.
Coach, what does Vanderbilt have to do to get on the board with a win? Because I just don't see it.
It just got to be one of those deals where they get a lot of help from the other team. Mississippi State helped them last week and kept the game close with all the turnovers and, less than 300 yards. But excuse me, I mean, they turned it over so much to Mississippi State, it was ridiculous. But I'm saying they got to have that happen for them, where they don't turn it over. The other team maybe gets a punt blocked. They get a tip pass. They get a scoop and score. They just struggle so bad offensively. They need some defensive scores to have any chance.
I agree with you. A team that also I think needs defensive scores to have chances is South Carolina, and the Gamecocks coming off a pretty embarrassing loss to Texas A&M. And I would say that Will Muschamp and Mike Bobo and the whole staff, they're reeling a little bit after that game, only scoring 3 points. And that was kind of a 3 at the end that was meaningless in the grand scheme of things. South Carolina, Ole Miss, Brent, to me, this is maybe a must-win game in terms of the future of Carolina. I don't know that for sure. That's straight up conjecture, but it just seems like they need some good news.
Yeah, they do, and they need some good vibes in a big way. But I will say, when your starting quarterback's name is Orr, you're probably not in the situation where you're going to be feeling good about yourself, because right now they're listed as Hilinski or Hill or whomever. So, it's one of those things. Interesting enough, last week they just drops killed them. They had Hill had 5 of his passes dropped. One of the receivers, Jalen Brooks, he had the dreaded like baseball 0 for 3 3K line. He had it as a receiver 0 for 3 in terms of targets with 3 drops. So, it was just a struggle offensively for them. When you look at what they can do, it's obviously the running backs with Fenwick and Harris, but also Shi Smith. He's been targeted over 10 times in 4 of their 6 games. He's been targeted over 15 times in 2 of those games. I think he has to at least get to that number this week for them to have any chance whatsoever to keep up with Matt Corral and Ole Miss's offense.
Well, Coach, I do think, though, that with the cornerbacks that South Carolina has, that may can mitigate a little bit of that Ole Miss passing game.
Yeah, and they played without their 2 safeties last week, which that makes a difference. We played without our 2. I mean, any way you look at it, you playing second-team safeties in this league, you're going to be in the world of hurt. So the big key for me with Ole Miss is how you handle success. They had that big win over Vanderbilt, and any way you look at it, they needed to win because they had a lot of what ifs, but they looked very good. I mean, unbelievable stats for throughout the game for the quarterback. Was just unreal. The Corral was just up and down the field, high percentage. Over 90%, wasn't he?
Yes. Yep.
Something.
31 of 34 with a drop.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
I forgot what that looks like.
So, but I'm saying, I talk about this every once in a while, but they've had, an off week, and then they have this game, and everybody down there in the Grove and all the students says, hey, we got it coming back here. We got it humming. This is a team we should kick. Everybody says, this is a team we should beat. But if you look back into the season, when the season was everybody's projecting, I'm sure South Carolina felt like this was going to be a must-win for us. This is a team we can beat, and vice versa. Ole Miss the same. They're 11-point favorite. South Carolina's going to have to generate some offense. If they're saying all those 3 guys are up in the air for quarterback, you got to think it's going to be one of those other 2. Maybe they'll put Doty in there and let him run and pass. Who knows? Hilinski's had some good success, but they need somebody to make a big play beside Harris on their team. You feel for them, but their defense is not playing very good either.
Brent, how big of a game is this for Matt Corral and just kind of his confidence? Because you talk about a roller coaster in the SEC. He's been, one of the better quarterbacks in the nation one week and can't put the ball in an accurate spot the next.
6 picks and then the 6 touchdowns. I mean, so, and what was amazing last week, he was 13 of 15 for, I think, almost 300, right around 280 yards on throws over 10 yards. So it was pushing it down the field with insane accuracy. So it was just one of those great games for him. And I think if you're an Ole Miss fan, and then 2, an NFL evaluator, what do you want to see? You just want to see the consistency. All right, we've seen the highs, we've seen the lows. Now let's see, can you consistently produce on a week-to-week basis?
Well, let's stick with you and let's make these picks. We've got 3 games, so we know which games we're picking. South we and Ole Miss is where we will start. Brent Rollins, Gamecocks or Rebels?
That would be, I think the Rebels are going to score some more. Coach?
I got to go with Ole Miss too here. I mean, I just don't see enough power on this offense to get enough points. If they play like they did against Arkansas, though, I mean, you never know what'll happen. Like we said, this is definitely the elevator team of the league as far as up and down. One week great, the next week but I got to go with Hotty Toddy.
I will as well, but I'm going to do my Lee Corso impression. Closer than the experts think. Maybe we're the experts there, so I don't know if that works as well. But I think South Carolina can keep it close, but not close enough. We move on, Coach. I'll go to you with Vanderbilt and Kentucky.
Yeah, I'm going with the Wildcats here. I think they're going to be playing a very emotional game. And a lot of times when you dedicate a game like this to somebody that's passed away, you maybe try a little bit too hard. But I could just see the fire in their eyes coming out here, and they realize, as Brent pointed out, who they got coming up. They got to build some They got to build some confidence. I can see this being a pretty big win for the Cats.
I'm going to do the same thing. They've got the emotional edge. They've got the talent edge. They've got the home field advantage edge. I just think everything. When you play Vanderbilt, it's a easier road to hoe. Brent?
Same. I think the exact same, and I think they're going to dominate and really make the next 2 weeks very interesting.
And that leaves us with our marquee game of the week. We've got Arkansas at Florida. I'll lead this one off since I went to each of you first. I think this will be a tight game. Brent, I think you're right that Arkansas presents some challenges that Florida's going to have to figure out a little bit. But based on what I saw with Dan Mullen coaching offense, I believe that they can do it. I'm going to go with the Gators. 10, 12 points, something like that. That's kind of where my head is. I think Arkansas will be able to sustain some drives with their offense. Coach, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pulling so hard for Arkansas, I can't even say woo pig suey, but just to get Georgia back in the mix. But it would be a massive upset for sure because, the one thing you can hope for is Florida's patting himself on the back and, maybe overlooking them. But I know Mullen won't have them have that. But with me being so far down, I probably should pick Arkansas to try to make a comeback, but if I would lose it, I'll be lower than well manure. So I'm going to go with the Gators.
Brent?
Well, last week in the Florida-Georgia game, I kind of went against my mantra in a way about offense meaning more. I do think Florida gets the victory. I think eventually their offense is just too much, but I do think Arkansas massively covers the spread here. I think the spread's like 17.5. And I also think, in terms of bold predictions, I'll hit that before we even get to them. I think Arkansas loses this game by less than Georgia lost to Florida, which was 16, I think.
Okay.
So I think that would be my prediction. I just think this game just seems like a letdown game for Florida, especially if Pitts doesn't play. Those elements lead to like you said, a 10-point-ish victory.
I'm actually my bold prediction comes from the same game, and that's that Arkansas will win the turnover margin by 2, but still lose the game. I think that's how it stays close a little bit. Arkansas has proved to be a bit of a ball hawking team, some really good active linebackers, and Kyle Trask did show some, inaccuracy at times. Now, some of those throws to the backs, it was a little bit harder to be inaccurate, but I think Barry Odom is going to find a way to get some turnovers there. Coach, do you have a bold prediction for us?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Wilson at quarterback for the Cats, and I feel like he'll get 2 touchdown passes against the Commodores.
I don't know if that's a compliment to him or kind of a shot at the Commodores either way, because Terry Wilson's not been very impressive with his arm so far this year, but I do like that pick. I think that if that would mean a good end of the season for Kentucky, a team that I think we all thought was going to be a little bit better coming into the season. Guys, any final thoughts before we wrap this show and head into the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, really glad that we have the show. Give me something to do because between now and Sunday, I'm just going to watch the Masters. That's about it.
I don't really watch a whole lot of golf, so I don't know what I'm going to do, actually. I'm going to wait. I got to wait till like Saturday night till Arkansas and Florida comes on to watch some football.
See, I do watch a lot of golf. I'm really excited about what's going on in Augusta. It's great for the state of Georgia. You've got 3 former Georgia Bulldogs in the field with Kevin Kisner and Brendan Todd and Bubba Watson, 2-time Masters champion. Obviously, there's a lot of SEC ties. You got Justin Thomas that went to Alabama. You've got Billy Horschel that went to Florida. There's just SEC guys all over the field because it's just such a great conference for golf as well. A lot of other sports too. So
now, I will say this: the dude that just what DeChambeau, is that his name?
Bryson DeChambeau that bulked up and hit Strauss 400 yards. Yeah.
All right, I'm a fan. If you just want to drop bombs and that's how you're going to do it, I'm a fan. That's almost the new baseball mentality in a way. Hey, just hit dingers.
Oh, that's his goal. Hit it as far as he can and make up some distance from there. All right, guys, appreciate this as always. We will do it again next Thursday, hopefully with a full slate of games. We will see. This has been Around the League from UGAsports.com. We'll chat with you next week.